about. I mean, the hurricane went offshore. Now it's going onshore. It missed Charleston. It's now going up as we speak. It's hitting. It used to be one of my favorite places to go, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. But that was like years ago. I haven't been to Myrtle Beach in years. But when I went there, it was great because I would go with my wife, who's Caucasian, into the convenience store, and uh, they would look at me. I'm Filipino. They'd look at her. She's white. And they would serve me up a whole mess of racism. That's how I remember South Carolina. But you know what? I don't want Hurricane Ian to destroy South Carolina. No, I want it to stay intact. Man, I don't wish ill of, I don't wish ill toward anyone. I'm just nothing but love. I'm nothing but, even Ron DeSantis. I realize that after, if you heard show 400 and show 399, if you read my column on the ALDEF blog, Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, aldef.org/blog, I think there are, as the t-shirt behind me says, I'm against speciesism. And I recognize Ron DeSantis as a lower form of political animal, but I am not speciesist against him. Maybe we can train him to be more loving and kind as opposed to cruel and inhumane. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see. Anyway, we're going to talk about that, of course, today, the hurricane. I mean, they're saying the damage of the hurricane almost maybe 50 billion. And that's not even the most, right? It's not maybe the most for Florida. But you got to go back to Katrina. Katrina was like, I don't know, 100 billion? I mean, Katrina was a lot. And you look at the list of hurricanes and you see, wow, just within the last, just within the last 10 years, the amount of damage. Now, I don't know if that's inflation. I don't know if that's, because the hurricanes were more damaging, but Katrina in 2005, 186 billion. Harvey in 2019, 149 billion. Oh, that was a bad one, Harvey. Then you had Maria, 2017. Oh, Harvey was 2017. I just can't read my writing. 107 billion. That was a double dose right there. Sandy in 2012, 82 billion. But you notice they're all like within the last 10 years. 2021, we had Ida at 79 billion. And they're saying that Ian is only going to be like 47 billion. But they're going to be more frequent. Lawrence Livermore Lab, the climate scientist there, said that this hurricane dumped, normally it would dump 5% more rain, a hurricane, which is a lot. Now they're saying it's a 10% dumper, which is double 5%. You say, oh, what's a 10% hurricane? That doesn't sound like that much. 10%, I can deal with 10%. No, you can't. They couldn't deal with 10%. 10% more rain. The flooding, the wind, the humidity. This is climate change in action. If you're with a climate denier, yeah, you're climate denier friends. The same people who are the election denier friends, let them stare at each other and deny each other their existence. And then you could say, well, metaphysically, you're incorrect. And scientifically, climate change is real. Look at Ian. Just look at the papers. Look at the internet. Ian is real, and we're not even done assessing the damage. We're not even done assessing the damage. I mean, they're saying some of the unofficial counts, anywhere from a half dozen to more than 2 dozen people deaths related to Ian. But you know that number is incomplete. I mean, they're unconfirmed deaths, possibly related, they say, but the damage is so devastating that I don't know how anyone can think it's, the numbers aren't going to be pretty horrific. I mean, I think that's just a given. And of course, Ron DeSantis sounds like he just sounds like the low-level bureaucrat that he is. The only way he gets attention is by puffing up his chest and saying, hey, I know how to divide and conquer. I know all about polarizing politics. I know how to talk. I know how to stop critical race theory. I don't know how to stop a hurricane, but he knows how to stop critical race theory, even though critical race theory isn't taught in the public schools in Florida. But he knows all the hot buttons. He knows how to deport people who don't deserve to be deported. He knows how to send migrants who are not illegal. He calls them illegal. They're just seeking asylum. Ron DeSantis knows how to play those games. He doesn't know how to play the leader. Here is a leader, Joe Biden. Did you hear him today? He came again before the country. He said every second counts. And you know why? You know why every minute counts in dealing with Ian?
It's not just a crisis for Florida. This is an American crisis. We're all in this together. And I've spoken to Governor DeSantis on multiple occasions, as well as this morning, and as well as mayors and county officials, both Republican and Democrat, from the places most affected.
See, Biden knows it's not just a Florida. It's all of America is in this. Biden was great this morning.
We're just beginning to see the scale of that destruction. It's likely to rank among the worst of the nation's and the worst in the nation's history. You've all seen seen it on television. Homes and property wiped out. It's going to take months, years to rebuild. And our hearts go out to all those folks whose lives have been absolutely devastated by this storm. America's heart is literally breaking just watching people watch it on television. I just want the people of Florida to know we see what you're going through and we're with you. We're going to do everything we can for you. I say to the rest of Americans, just imagine yourself in that situation. Water rising, walls collapsing, streets turned literally into rivers, charter boats on top of automobiles. Watching the home and the community work so hard to establish, literally washed away. And folks across the country are now waiting to hear from parents and grandparents who live in Florida, just hoping and praying they're okay.
That's the president. He knows how to bring it back to the human level. Of course, he's opening up FEMA's coffers. Everyone's going to, if you document and you file with FEMA, you're going to get taken care of. That's the promise. That's what government does. When you look at Republicans, you look at conservatives and say, I'm a small government conservative. I'm a small government Republican. Remember this moment. Remember this moment in American history. Government isn't about profiting. Government isn't about scoring points on anyone. Government is about helping others in time of crisis. We're the United States of America. You heard Joe Biden. We're in this together. Volunteers are coming from all over. And given the recent record of Governor Ron DeSantis, all this outpouring of sympathy and support for Florida sure does make Governor Ron DeSantis seem so small, which is what he is. He's small. He's smaller than small. He's a mean, small political animal. And Ian's his payback for dumping on migrants, dumping on immigrants, dumping on the LGBTQ, dumping on Joe Biden, saying that Joe Biden hates Florida. Joe Biden does not hate Florida. Anyway, talking about Ian, probably will talk more later about that. Let me tell you about all the other stuff coming on today. I'm going to bring on my guest, Professor Daniel Phil Gonzalez, in any minute, because this is the eve of October 1, and October is Filipino American History Month. And so we'll talk about that. It's also International Podcasting Day. Now, I know I keep threatening to put Emil Takeout, the live stream, on the podcast sites. Actually, Emil Takeout is available as a podcast. I talk about Little Manila Rising. If you go there to any of your podcast sites, it's a kind of an evergreen podcast about one of my favorite nonprofits, Filipino nonprofits in America. But this is the live stream that you catch only if you go to YouTube. You can catch it live. You can catch it live on Twitter at Emil Amok, or on Facebook, fb.com/EmilGuillermo.media. And you catch the replays on amok.com. That's how you watch this. I'm live now. And if you're live and you go to Facebook, you can say, hey, I can chat to Emil and say, Emil, you're one full of Filipino, or whatever. You can say hi, as some people are wont to do, or ask a question. You can make it interactive if you so choose. But that's what we do this live stream, just to make it like I'm on this tightrope, this digital tightrope. And occasionally, like on Fridays, I love to bring on a guest. He's a man who is College of Ethnic Studies, San Francisco State University, Asian American Studies, Filipino American Studies. It's all of those things over there at the College of Ethnic Studies at SFSU. He's my dear friend, Professor Emeritus. If you're an emeritus, that's something. That is something. Daniel Phil Gonzalez. Professor Daniel.
Good afternoon, sir. Thanks for having me on once again. Glad to be here. Glad to see you in good health.
I gotta have you on, especially since it's sort of our combined birth months, and
Libras, yes.
I wanted to wish you a happy birthday, and
you did, and thank you.
Mine is yet to come. We when you get to this stage where you don't count anymore. Right? I mean, no, you count, but you don't count the years. It's just, it's sort of like
it's not a big deal. The years aren't a big deal.
No, but it's true though. The reason, one of the things you understand when you get older is just by living longer and experiencing more, you are smarter than most young people. Look, I hate to generalize, but actually it's true. And I
don't know about smarter, but we know more.
We know. Okay, smart is yeah. It depends on how you define smart.
If
you say,
because I know a lot of people who know a lot, but pretty dumb.
Pretty dumb. I know, and a lot of people who are dumb, and they're even dumber. That's the surprising thing. That's a really.
It's always everything's political with you.
Wait, no.
No, we want to do that.
Look, I mean that though. People who are older, naturally, we stop counting. We stop if we need a fact, we'll just Google it. We stop counting. We stop remembering. We just have the experience, and not to be ageist. I don't want to be reverse ageist, because Lord knows I've seen ageism come the other way. But if we just dispense with the age and say, just look at experience, by virtue of being chronologically older, more experienced, we're just
what we are is we're postmodern behaviorists. So we are a returning breed that was once schooled in behaviorism,
Uh-huh.
and then screwed by postmodernism, and then we screwed postmodernism back. That's what I call PPM, postmodernism.
Uh,
And so we're in this limbo now where we're surrounded by people who are younger than us who still try to maintain a postmodernist stance. And it's really kind of difficult to handle. I'm glad I retired when I
Yeah.
did.
Well, look, I never started. They just sort of retired me before I could get going, and that way I don't have to live that kind of regret. But that's a good analysis, though, Dan, of the postmodernistic. I don't know. It sounds very intellectual, which you know.
Well, it was an attempt, but see, it was a rebirth of conservative dogma, and the word that I associated with it is sacerdotal.
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 Yeah, priest-like,
Yeah, yeah. Uh,
priest-like, right?
yeah.
Yes, yes, not to make fun of religion,
Oh,
but
heaven.
but but deconstructive religiosity. Okay, people being committed to a certain style of writing and a certain style of expression that
Uh,
is intended to exclude not only the general public, it's intended to exclude anybody but graduate students
exactly.
who have to read that stuff
Exactly.
in order to get their degrees.
Look, as a journalism adjunct, which already
Yes.
separates me from the junct. I was, but I would get notes from professors in other disciplines saying you're teaching them how to news write, and that's so it's so antithetical to academic writing. You're going to make them understood, and then that's going to be terrible.
At- above the sixth
Yeah.
grade
Well,
vocabulary. Oh no.
look, I always cop to that. I say, look, I'm a journalist. If I were to write for a mainstream paper, it wouldn't be the New York Times. It would be my weekly reader because I write for third and fourth grade. Third and fourth grade because everyone's got to get it on the first pass.
Yeah.
On the
Oh.
first pass, you can't like oh, let me read this again. No, you got to get it once, and that's sort of the beauty of broadcast, the beauty of live. You get one pass. You got to make it very you as soon as you start dropping sacerdotal, Dan.
So as a graduate Harvardian, you didn't have to sit there with a thesaurus. Remember when before we had Google and any kind of
Yeah,
search engine,
yeah.
we had computers, but we didn't have search engines. And did you ever have a class where you had to sit with a thesaurus in your lap?
No, 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 no. Now, well,
You never had a class like
no,
that? Because I did.
I didn't because I sort of grew up reading the thesaurus, and so I knew most of the words that I would encounter unless they were really uh, overly jargonistic, like history things or yeah, like really into the times, like
Had geographic.
or yeah, medieval or yeah. So but I know the thing is this is the problem with academia. It's mostly intended to be an inclusive or exclusive club,
Exactly.
and I
It's like having the church turn their back on the mass again.
Latin mass. Actually,
That
I
mass.
went. I started going to a Latin mass about 5 years ago. I was indoctrinated by a Latin mass guy. I have since not done that. I'm back to Vatican II. Actually, I'm now post Vatican II. I only go when I feel like it. Oh
Uh,
no, post Vatican II is I'm a COVID Catholic. I'm a
Zoom it.
yeah.
Zoom that
I,
sucker.
I Zoom it or and I learned that by going my favorite place to go in New York City. This is the honest to God truth. Up until I became a COVID Catholic, the favorite place I used to go to in New York City was St. Patrick's Cathedral
Sure.
because it was quiet. You got some tourists, but you can find a place to sit. It was quiet for the city, and You can go to mass like between 7 and 9, and the masses are like 20 minutes long. They get you in and out, and no homily. The homily is like, be good, all right, be kind, amen. And then they go right to the, and then they're serving communion, and it's like in and out. It's great. And that I discovered it when I was making trips to New York. Now I would just go to sit there because it's quiet. But like I said, I'm a COVID Catholic. Haven't been to church since well, COVID is still not over, right?
Yep,
And
yep. It's still with us, despite what El Presidente said a couple of weeks ago.
the only thing that I would knock Joe Biden, because as you know from the beginning of this show today, I don't want to sound like a Joe Biden lover, but I think we got to get with the program. He's a leader. He's good, and he's another reason why I think we shouldn't be ageist. I think he's kind of toning it down a little bit about running again, only because there's a lot of rumbling that he may be too old. He may not have the vigor. He may not. I think he's got plenty of vigor, and the person I'd consult if he wasn't vigorous would be Dr. Jill Biden, and I think the doctor says he's vigorous enough
Hmm.
for the
Okay,
president.
I'm just gonna let that go.
Okay, all right.
You know, 'cause-
I just think if you look at his schedule, my goodness, it's hard to keep up. And
oh no, I think he's capable and competent at this time. I do think that it would really be extraordinary, right, if he was to continue at this level of competence for another 6 years. I think you're going to see him slowing down a bit, right, and I think he's realizing that they probably have had private conversations,
yeah,
and even if he was showing a continuity of competence, Jill's got to be saying, you really want to campaign against these guys? You want to do that?
right,
And then there's also another issue. Uh, Too many Democrats are too freaking old. I mean, it's not just Joe.
yeah,
I mean, there's people that are showing all kinds of decay in their competence, and one of them is one of our senators.
yeah,
I really was upset when Boxer decided to retire,
yeah,
and Feinstein stayed on.
yeah. Boxer was younger. Maybe she was setting the example. But I think you're right. I have defended on this show and throughout. I have defended Feinstein, the senior senator. I mean, but look, here's the thing.
You
It's a
have defended her, yeah, but have you defended her because of the political position she takes?
I
Or
well, I defended her she could because she the way the government works, it's an autocracy. Well, it's not an autocracy. It is a what is the word? The more senior you are, the more power you have, right? It's based
okay,
on seniority. And look at the power that Alex Padilla has replacing Boxer. Hardly, I mean, he's got no seniority. I mean, you're out in the woodshed practicing before you can really wield any power. And so I think that's why Dianne Feinstein has my support until she shows me she can't do the job. And if she can't do the job, then we start talking about replacing. It's almost close. Maybe she's overstayed her welcome by a couple years. I mean, I've heard the rumblings that people have been rumbling publicly about for some time. At least I've heard when I first heard things about Dianne Feinstein. It was maybe 4 years ago, but and now they're more public. But we need a little more evidence that that's it. And actually, I'd like for her to come to grips with this and say, "That's it.
it's
That's it.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's time." So,
I would like to see a number
well,
of
she's not.
members of the Senate, particularly,
Yeah,
and
she's
on
not.
both sides of the aisle, as they say.
Yeah, Yeah, well, if you want to keep engaging the public, and I mean younger folks, I mean, I was looking at some things, people talking about, well, who are the Democrats who could emerge and be, um, who could lead? And I saw names like Klobuchar, names like Claire McCaskill. They're not exactly spring chickens, but they, in terms of they're not 80 years old,
That's right. They're not even 70 years old.
even 70.
They're yeah. I think there's a number of people, including the governors, who were running for the Democratic nomination
Yeah.
in 2019. There are several people.
Well, and then of course they're the obvious ones like the vice president, Kamala Harris, and then there's Secretary Buttigieg. If he gets everyone, some kind of uh, some kind of discount for all the air travel problems that they've had, that would be popular. But I noticed that California's governor Gavin Newsom is always named, but I think he's seen as too liberal. I think
Yeah,
he's I think
yeah.
he's seen, but if you had
I
to
don't.
pick,
I don't think he could get the nomination. People would just run him out. He's too liberal.
and it's almost sad that he sort of puts himself out there as like he's the battering ram for the Democrats because he doesn't have to worry about, okay, the presidency, it may not be in the cards. He's sort of like the a younger male version of Hillary Clinton. You mention his name, and if you're Republican or moderate or
Sure.
conservative, you cringe. But I don't know. I think Kamala Harris is getting
Oh,
that
they
way.
did more than cringe about Hillary. I mean, yeah. Several of the people who I crewed with, that's crewed as CREWED, right, on a sailboat,
No.
were,
Oh, that.
were veterans. In fact, the majority of them were veterans.
Yeah.
And they had a dislike that was just short of vile hatred.
Ah.
I can't, it's almost vile hatred, the attitude that they had towards Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it was, in my opinion, misogyny,
Yeah.
but a lot of it was based on legitimate criticisms. You
Yeah.
know, questions about their global initiative and all the rest of that. I think there were legitimate issues there, but what really bothered me, I expected that from veterans.
Yeah.
Uh, what really, particularly, middle class and upper middle class veterans, the kind of guys that knew how to crew,
Yeah.
and but white women, educated white women,
But they were against her.
voted against Hillary. Oh yeah,
Or some
oh
people.
yeah,
Yeah.
oh yeah. Remember 209, the
Yeah.
so-called civil rights. A lot of educated white women voted for 209.
Yeah.
Who benefited most from affirmative action projects?
White women.
That's right.
White women.
That's right.
I mean that
And
that.
and especially liberal white women, right?
All
Uh,
right. Well, look, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent with the politics. It's just that I was just reading something where uh, Newsom is sort of like the battering ram out there who's
I
trolling,
agree. Yeah.
and DeSantis, Florida is doing him no favors. Florida is kind of like the big payback to DeSantis for all of his misdeeds, with immigrants and with LGBTQ and with critical race theory and with on and on. I don't think Ron DeSantis, if you looked at his press conferences the last couple of days, he just hasn't brought the empathy, hasn't brought the I care for you Florida. He's all like he just seems small. He can't do anything unless it's a divisive, polarizing, stop critical race theory, stop wearing a mask, get these migrants out. I'm sending them to Martha's Vineyard. I mean, it's showing, I think, single handedly, Hurricane Ian is showing how Ron DeSantis has self disqualified himself from any political ambition, any higher office.
I wish I could agree with that. The problem, I think he'll recover, and the major reason he'll recover is because he's got voters. He's got a substantial number of people who feel that Trump is too much a loudmouth and he's over, and they want somebody else
Yeah.
to be able to replace Trump at the forefront of the Republican Party. And,
Well,
and he's the front runner, in my opinion. He is the front runner. Ted Cruz can try all he wants, but Ted Cruz is Ted Cruz. The guy really doesn't even have. He sounds like an imitation of DeSantis in terms of the positions that he takes.
well, the thing about Ted Cruz is he's too smart, and you don't trust him, and it comes across as fake. The thing about
Because it is.
yeah, it is fake, but at least, but
It
you
is fake.
but you point to him and say, Ted Cruz, you're smart. You're too smart to take those stupid positions. DeSantis has the sin of being earnest. He's earnest. He means it, but he also does it because he's polarizing and he knows that's what it takes to win. So maybe you're right. He's the guy, but I don't think so. I hope, and I said it in my column on the Aldef blog. I said, look at DeSantis when he gives his public statements on Hurricane Ian, and just remember those. Remember Martha's Vineyard. Remember all those cockamamie ideas he had about denying hurricane relief to the Sandy victims. Or
Yeah, for New York.
yeah,
Why are we sending money to a rich state, right?
yeah. I mean,
And his state, like many red states,
yeah.
actually take more from the
Oh,
federal coffers than they contribute. So
yeah,
California and New York are huge contributors
yeah,
to the federal coffers, and we get back less than we contribute.
yeah. And this is the thing about DeSantis. He's always there for a handout. He'll say he's small government G. He's always there for a handout. The small government G, though, gives Florida so much of a surplus. He bragged. He bragged about his surplus at the press conference yesterday. Oh, but we're taking your dollars. Send the dollars in. Here's our 800 number. You can send it direct to us. Send us cash. Don't send us food. We got food. We got water. We'll get that from the feds and the Red Cross. But send us dollars. I wouldn't trust DeSantis with money. This is me. I just wouldn't do it. So anyway, so now the hurricane is in South Carolina. It's terrible. Like I said at the top, I remember South Carolina visiting it about 25, 30 years ago. I used to go to South 25, 30 years ago. So if you think South Carolina is modern now, imagine it 25, 30 years ago when I was a Filipino guy with his white bride going to the beach, going to the convenience store to buy, whatever, and getting served up a whole mess of racism, hearing the comments from the good old boys in the convenience store. But do I think ill of South Carolina? Do I want anything bad to happen to them because of Hurricane Ian? No, no. I wish nothing but the best. Nothing, because I'm just not. This is one thing, Dan, what being older gets you. You get a sense of wisdom when it comes to putting out the love to get love in return. I just want, and I mean that. I mean that.
I personally know at least a few young people that have left both North and South Carolina because even if they weren't LGBTQ,
Mhm.
they saw how their friends and their relatives within the family were treated, and that began to be the point of the knife that created the schism between them and the older generations
Ah,
in their families and in their communities, and they left, and many of them came here.
these,
Uh,
these are
West
Filipino Americans, or just
No, no. These are all kinds of different people. In
yeah.
fact, the majority of the people that I know that left are white.
Yeah. Well, it's white country there,
It's a
South.
white state. Yeah, very
Carolina.
much so. Yeah.
And I can see that. I can see where people, like you said, regardless of the race, but if they have certain, um, say, more open tendencies, open-minded tendencies, and they see relatives. I mean, this is typical. what kind of conversation do you have at Thanksgiving dinner? Do you
Oh, that's exactly the kind of circumstances that they faced. It was
yeah,
terrible.
yeah, can you even talk politics? And then of course you seek refuge in a place like California. And this is one of the reasons why I like or I consider leaving California because big and maybe there's a place that's cheaper, but it always comes down to, oh, you can go to that cheaper place, but it's in South Carolina, or you can go to that cheaper place, but it's in North Carolina, or you can go to that cheaper place, but it's just it's not
It's in South Dakota.
South Dakota, yeah, where there's a lot of Filipinos apparently in South Dakota. There are in the Pew study said the largest Asian group in South Dakota were Filipinos, which
Yeah.
makes
Do you have an explanation for how that happened?
all I can say is I don't know, as a Filipino cowboys or farmers, I or
It
may
would help if we could see if
oh,
they're first or second generation
or
immigrant.
the Filipinos who go there because they love the Wall drugstore. I think there's a place called Wall,
Okay.
and everyone goes there. Like if you are if you live out of a camper, or if you're a trailer guy, if you're nomad land, you end up going there. That's what I heard. So maybe they're all working there. That's possibly why. Could be nurses. It could be service workers, right?
Well,
That
that's
that
how I got cousins that went to West Virginia
of course, West
and
Virginia.
had one side, my in-law side of the family married my first cousin. She's a nurse.
A
Nurse,
nurse. Oh,
if you have to say
that's
nurse if you're
very
Ilocano.
the
And well,
nurse.
anyway, her husband also Ilocano from the same town and all that. They were from high school sweethearts. He
Yeah.
established a physician practice in
Uh-huh.
Wheeler.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Well,
Wheeler.
yeah,
WWVA. Wheeler,
yep,
West Wheeling.
Wheeling. That's it. Yeah,
Wheeling, not Wheeler. Wheeler. That's what we
yeah,
drive. We drive a
that's right. Yeah,
wheeler, two wheeler,
16 wheeler.
three wheeler when we're little tykes. Three-wheeler.
Yeah, Wheeling. You're right. You're
Wheeling.
right.
Wheeling.
Okay.
Going
Anyway, what are the other things that we're supposed to be talking about? You did Biden.
hey,
Oh, did you talk to all?
no, hey, Dan, Wheeling. That's your Manang Wheeling.
Yeah.
Oh, Manang Wheeling.
That's too inside curve, man. Nobody, only fellow flams, are going to get that, and
Well,
some of them are going to be insulted.
okay, so look, all right, so we talked about Biden.
Did you
Uh,
talk about Tua?
I haven't talked about two, but were you watching the football game last night?
No, I did not watch it. I just watched the news.
So here's the thing about Thursday night football. I love Al Michaels. I love Al Michaels.
Yeah,
I
he's cool.
I
Yeah,
wish he were still doing Sunday night, but he goes off to Thursday night, and Amazon has the game. It's only on the internet, and it's on afterwards on the NFL channels, but after the fact. But you can and I didn't know. I forgot there was even a Thursday night game, and so I'm watching. I get to the game right as Tua is on the ground doing this finger thing,
right, right.
and that's called fencing, which has nothing to do with fencing, but has to do with your cervical.
Brain injury.
Yeah, and so I don't know. Did you ever play football?
Just on the street, you know,
Oh, that's even dangerous because you
in
don't have
the
a
park.
ball.
Yeah, because we always said it was touch,
Oh
and it
yeah,
always turned into tackle.
that's when you go like
Yes. No, we were blocking straight on.
yeah. Well, look,
You
I played football. Um, Look, it doesn't matter when you play. As an old man, in your 20s, as in college and high school, Pop Warner, grade school. I put on the pads when I was 12, and so and the great players. I mean, I was good, but I wasn't great. I mean, the great players, they're going to play. They're going to have careers.
Which end did you play, or did you play both?
I no, I I was growing up in an area where we were lucky to have enough people for a Pop Warner team. So you had to go double
Right, you had to play both ends. Yeah,
and defense, and like you were playing the whole damn time, which means you doubled your exposure to
yeah,
injury.
your risk. Yeah,
Yeah, so I know I was lucky not to have been hurt in Pop Warner, but I tried playing, and I was great at Pop Warner. I was good in high school, but what I wasn't, I had long hair, and they wouldn't play. They said cut your hair, or you can't play. I said, well, screw that. You know, I'm not gonna cut my hair, and I rode the bench in protest. I was the original Colin Kaepernick. I rode the I rode
straight hair.
I I had straight, but it was long. It was.
Yeah.
I looked like, man, who is this guy? Are we playing Powder Puff? His hair is so long. You can't do that, Neil. And I wouldn't. I said, you can't tell me to cut my hair. But I was better than all of them. I really was, because I had Pop Warner ball, and none of them played Pop Warner. So I was better because I had all the experience. Once again, having a little experience, you're better. So once people got hurt, and because it happens, right? They had to play me, and I got to play. And so the first touch was a straight up the middle play. I was a halfback. They call it a 30 dive. It was supposed to be a dive play. They give me the ball. I go 50 yards for a touchdown.
Woo!
It was just, I got lucky. It was just the right defense, right? So I was really all keyed up. First time I touched the ball, 6-yard touchdown. Oh, it was great. And of course, I didn't cut my hair. It didn't matter to them. They said, oh, he got a touchdown for us. They sent me back out because no one cares about high school footballers' safety, right? I go back out there on the kickoff, and I make a tackle. And because I should tackle with your shoulder.
Yeah.
But I tackle with, I tried to bombardier them with my head. I blacked out. I blacked out for a good, I would say, it was probably longer than 3 seconds. But it felt like, the lights go out.
Yep.
And then it came back on. I think that was a concussion.
Yeah.
That was a concussion.
Definitely.
And I've never forgotten it. And did I say anything? No. Did anyone care? No. Did I go back and play the next series of downs? I did. And
you were being a man.
Well, what I thought, but this is, so take my experience, multiply it by about 1 million, and that's the NFL experience. But I have a taste of what that was like to go in and to be debilitated by a hit and to have the lights go out.
Yep.
Because the lights went out, and then the lights came back on, and it scared me, but I still played. But get this, I knew enough to quit the team the next week. I just quit the team. That's it.
And was this your junior or senior year?
This was sophomore year.
Okay. And you were already on varsity? That's pretty damn good.
No, I wasn't. I was on the
JVs?
Yeah. I was because we didn't have a freshman team. We just had the sophomore team. But I was the best one because of Pop Warner. And all the backs who were on my team, they went to play varsity next year.
Right. That's the way it usually worked, yeah.
And they knew I was better than them. Even though I was, about the same size. But I quit the team and I never looked back. And that's just the way it was. I had that one experience and it was enough to get me to quit because I knew there was something more important than football. And I wasn't.
Yeah, I think I've seen a lot more people, particularly people who played either offensive or defensive line. A lot of them are retiring earlier. You know, they're setting the mark and retiring earlier,
Yeah. It,
and
it's
I think that's a smart choice. You
it's
know,
dangerous. It's
yeah,
dangerous, especially if they don't teach you how to block and tackle in a safe way. No one said, okay, lead with your shoulder. Don't, I mean, this helmet to helmet thing, that's just within the last few years,
yeah,
right?
that's right.
I mean, that was never a thing. And, if you're playing sophomore football, you're not getting the best stuff, right? So, I mean, no one cares about what kind of equipment high schoolers are using. So you got to figure if they don't really pay attention at the pro level, imagine all the people in college and high
Sure,
school, Pop Warner, how they're getting
sure.
the short shrift because
At the school that I attended, they were always, in fact, it was very frequently that it was your school and my school that ended up, you know, fighting for the city championship. That's right, not only in football. I mean, across the board, many times.
right.
And but the way that coach, who was the winning coach for SI Tringali,
Oh
the
yeah.
way that he had people train was sadistic, in my opinion.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Hey, look,
It was horrible.
do you know my cousin, Ernie Schlobum?
Oh, so yeah, tall Ernie.
Tall Ernie. He was half Filipino.
Yeah,
Or his father was
yeah,
white,
he
but
was in my class. Yeah,
yeah, Ernie was the big star running back
yeah,
for SI.
yeah.
Anyway, the thing is, yeah, we when I talk to him, I see him every few years. We get
I play
we
guitar
only,
too.
we only see each other at funerals. That's how
Mm,
bad we're the this is Filipino American history. You are a baptism, birthday, funeral.
we get to do weddings and christenings
Oh,
too.
I forgot. Yeah, sneak in the weddings, bathroom. Yeah, sneak in the weddings and the christenings, and the birthday parties, and then the funeral.
Yeah.
Oh, you got
Well,
quadruple.
lately it's more. It's been more to the funerals because we're of an age, man.
Yeah. Oh, I know, and no, but I'll tell you. But you go with your parents, and they drag you to these things, like my parents did, and then you get to know. That's how you get to know everyone in the community. Anyway, so like to get to Tua, back to Tua, I think we need something. Or I quit the team. I I think it's only going to make it. What's going to make a difference is if fans care.
Yes,
Because if
and I
fans say,
think they do. I think this time they did. I mean, that was freaky. They didn't like it. They got a lot of criticism.
yeah,
Coach got hellified criticism,
yeah,
not only from the from the NFL players, but from the fans too.
yeah. Well, the fans have to say, look, we can take a game that's not as violent. We don't have to have the UFC of football. We can have football that's where you don't have to worry if someone's going to get hurt or crippled or paralyzed for life. We don't need a football that is. I mean, when it shouldn't be a sport where if you're playing at the highest level, it shouldn't be an expectation that someone could be hurt at any time. That is a kind of suicide, right? I mean, that's not sport. After a while, that's not sport. And if I mean, I think now they're looking at trying to ban things like cameras showing someone fence, because like that was freaky. But when people start seeing that, or when people start seeing the previous week, to a collapse, right? He got hit and then he started walking and he he collapsed and a lineman picked him up. They should have had him in concussion protocol for this game.
Yep,
That, and this is a Thursday game. That means he only had 4 days of rest between
that's right.
Sunday and Thursday. And now I was very enthusiastic about football this year because for some reason Every few years, I just say, I really like football. Because I played it. I want to, I anticipate the games, and I was really excited for Tua because I rooted for him in Alabama. Of course, he got hurt. He got hurt at Alabama. His
Yeah.
hip got screwed up, and then he recovered, and now he gets hurt. Now I just hope. I I kind of lost my appetite for football.
Yeah. I did you notice that both times that he hit his head, he fell backwards.
Back, yeah,
That the rebound
yeah. That
was
always gets you. You go back,
that's really, yeah,
yeah.
and that rebound is largely the result of turf, of
Oh yeah,
synthetic turf.
yeah,
But no, so years ago, the big problem was people were breaking legs and ankles,
yeah,
and knees were being dislocated because of astroturf.
yeah,
So they've gotten rid of some of the problems that were associated with people's feet getting stuck in position on the astroturf, and so that when they get hit, there's no place for the foot to slide,
yeah.
and then the leg takes all of the pressure.
Right.
So that has been lessened, but there's still the concussion. You
The
know,
the,
the,
the
the
you know what
rebound.
those black things that they kind of dust up when you hit the turf.
Yeah,
They put that in there to soften,
that's right.
I believe. But
That's right.
the turf is still pretty hard. It kind of emulates grass, but it would be great to see a natural grass, element because the sod is soft,
That's right.
and it might cushion. The surface is important. The
It
other thing,
actually gives. Sod gives.
yeah, yeah.
You know.
Yeah, the other thing that I've heard, and this is the truth: get rid of helmets.
You know. Yeah,
Get
I
rid.
know. Initially, that sounds really ridiculous,
No,
right?
it
But
just means that you can only do certain things. You wouldn't do like a kamikaze headbutt thing, or you can make a
right,
rule.
right.
But if you make it like rugby, and you can wear a rugby style helmet, it would take the head out. And here's the other thing: it would give you peripheral vision.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean, peripheral.
better hearing, and
Yeah,
everything.
I mean
Yeah,
peripheral vision. You put a, you. I was an elementary, junior high school football stud in the schoolyard because no pads, right? We played touch football, no helmet, great peripheral vision. You can cut on the concrete, you can run fast, right? The moment I played football and they give you pads, add add 10, 15 pounds, add a helmet. You can't see, you can't move, you're slower by about a second, right? Um, you get rid of a helmet, you don't need the pads even. You could probably play it like rugby. It'd be better,
right.
pure football, a pure football.
See, I've seen a lot of rugby guys lose teeth though, so
Ah,
they got to do something better about
you got
that.
to wear
Yeah,
your mouth guard, but
yeah, and you got to get a good
yeah,
one. There's
but
some brands that are better than others.
you might have to, if you take away the helmet, you might have to legalize holding. Because you couldn't, you say, okay, you can,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, but you would take away the problem with face masks,
yeah,
and because that's dangerous, right? Even when they do it incidentally, the neck snaps around when they get
but
that.
if you said
When you get
you
it.
can hold, but you can only hold for 2 seconds, 2 second hold, and then
Yeah, you're making it sound like flag football, sort
well,
of.
but no, but I don't like flag because you're past the guy by about a good 2 yards, and your flag
Yeah,
flies up.
and you can still snatch.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could snatch it. The guy wouldn't ever have made contact if it was real. Yeah,
I hate flag. I'd rather have
shorter flag, shorter flag.
oh, two hand touch. Two
Yeah, two hand touches. Yeah, but I told you, man, we played two hand touch on sod, and it always turned into straight up tackling, man.
well, all right. So
You
it's
know?
just up to you. Okay, look. So the bottom line on Tua, got to reform the game. Got to and
Yeah,
look. I
yeah. Well, let's start at the top. He shouldn't have been played.
He should.
He shouldn't have been. You said concussion protocol first time he fell. Yes, he shouldn't have played the rest of that
Yeah.
game, and he shouldn't have played 5 days
Okay.
later.
I,
Okay.
I look. I agree. I agree with you. But I think we spend this time on Tua because he was the Asian American hope. I mean, he was 3-0. He he. I mean, Asian American quarterbacks from St. Louis High School in Honolulu. He's one of two, right? Marcus Mariota
Hmm.
with
Hmm.
the Atlanta Falcons. He's the other one, but they were having good years. This was
Yep.
bumper crop year for Asian American football quarterbacks in Hawaii, and the younger
Yep.
ones coming up, playing at Oklahoma and playing, all over the Hawaiian quarterbacks. So they're kind of a thing now. So anyway, I was really rooting for Tua. I hope he gets well, but
Yeah. I think we all
yeah.
do.
All right. So
You
let's. All right. So, I didn't understand that. Uh-oh. What's that?
Oh, my phone woke up.
Okay. All right. So
There was something you said evidently.
okay. All right. So we're gonna put Tua to bed, and let's. I talked about Biden, or we talked about Biden. Let's talk about Russia, because just briefly, because it's the other story that's getting play. In fact, Biden went from Hurricane Ian to talking about Russia. Says we're going to give more money, 13 billion's coming. Uh, he's just handing out money. He says we're going to give Ida folks or Hurricane Ian folks, anyone who's FEMA's got the money. We're going to take care of you. And then he just turned on a dime, and he addressed Russia and said 13 billion to the Ukrainians. We're going to be strong. So you're the history prof. Tell me, Dan, are we? It looks like,
That's Filipino American
oh
history. I have a little bit of global history because I was in a double major, international relations and political science. There were two separate departments at the university that I
okay,
attended.
but here,
So,
all right,
okay, so go
look,
ahead.
you're still well qualified. I just uh, yeah, and I saw this. The New Yorker ran a piece. It said, "What if we're in World War III already? What if this is World War III, and we don't know it? I mean, it seems like it wasn't intended as a joke. It was intended as the reality.
That's serious
Yeah,
consideration. Yeah.
the reality of how these geopolitical things play out, and there's a threat of war, and there's a real war. There's a kind of cover war, the Ukraine, fight against Russia's, uh, takeover of a sovereign nation, uh, which is
Well, Putin explains it as a proxy war, right? He doesn't use the word proxy, but he equates the support for Ukraine as an entire Western
yeah,
alliance bent on dividing up Russia. So that's kind of an interesting position that he's taking. But there are a lot of people east of Moscow that wouldn't mind dividing Russia up and being independent nations in their
oh,
own.
you mean
So
the Chinese? They're
sure, well,
Korean.
yeah. The Mongolians, man, and there's all kinds of people. All of the places that border countries like Kyrgyzstan, right, and all that. There are a lot of people who wouldn't mind being carved out of Russia. The people in
Yeah,
Siberia. I mean, the people dread being imprisoned in Siberia for a reason. But what people are looking at is more the weather and the harsh conditions. They're not looking at the fact that Siberia, with the exception of Vladivostok, right, it gets very little
yeah.
support
Well,
from the Moscow
well.
regime.
So here's the thing about the where we are. It sounds like Biden's going to support the allies, or the allies are going to. They're all going to support each other. We're going to support Ukraine, and it sounds like there's. I don't see anyone talking diplomacy, or hey, we're going to talk. I see sanctions, more sanctions are coming, more money to the Ukrainians is coming. I see long war, long war.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I don't whether or not it's the prelude to World War III or it's the actual start of the kind of hostilities that will naturally arise from this confrontation. I'm not so sure that people are that willing to make a commitment that would result in a World War III. But it's kind of up to the Russians,
Yeah,
frankly.
well,
Their behavior towards the EU, their behavior at the
yeah,
UN was outright
yeah,
insulting. I mean, and I get questioned all the time. Why is it that the UN is hard? They can't do anything about Russia. And I said, while I was an international relations major way back in the late '60s, early '70s, China. The big question was, do we admit China to the UN? And the reason that was an issue, there were two major reasons. One was if we admit them to the UN, they're so big and powerful that they're going to be able to join. They're not just going to be a member of the General Assembly, they're going to be a member of the Security Council.
yeah,
And they're going to have a vote. And any vote on that council is essentially a veto.
yeah,
Okay. And so you would have, even though Russia and China were not in good terms, in the late '60s and early '70s, right? They were at least unified around issues like containing India, and India was reacting to China. China was trying to build they were trying to double rail a railroad all the way out to the Aksai Chin because there were mineral deposits and oil out there, and that was right on the border, the Himalayan border with India. Okay, so there was an opportunity there for I think actual World War III. People started doing things. Syria, remember when Syria mounted almost their entire military on the border with Jordan?
yeah, yeah. Well, see, that's
Okay,
the thing. It's gonna. We're going into a period where we got cold weather coming up, long
yep,
war.
it'll slow the thing down.
Yeah, but then energy is going to be an issue. Oil. Who gets the heating oil they want?
Well, the U.S. has got to stop, bombing the freaking pipeline.
Well, yeah, it's that's the. Uh,
Yeah,
it depends. If you're a Russian propagandist, the U.S. is doing it, but the truth is, it's some kind of self-sabotage on the part of the Russians.
yeah.
Probably, probably. I mean, but no one has the facts. But probably only Donald Trump has that in secret classified documents, in which is
Yeah, but he had those classified documents for 18 months, man. So the question is, how much money was he able to raise putting some of that stuff up for bid?
well, that's the question. All right, so look, all right, I didn't even want to talk about Mar-a-Lago because I thought I'd get a break from Mar-a-Lago but as long as you mention it, uh, there's still a lot of people who had kind of Trump's view out there. Some of them are Republican media people who have Trump's view that, hey,
They planted stuff
yeah, Putin's
that
okay.
wasn't there before.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, but the 11th Circuit, man. What did they say?
oh yeah, you're talking about
That stuff is irrelevant. It's the question is, did he have possession?
okay.
And was that legal?
All
And
right.
the answer is no.
All right.
So, classified or not, the answer is the guy is admitting all over the place that he committed a crime.
Yeah. All right.
That's what it is. Okay, so
All
it's
right.
real simple from a legal point of view.
So here's the exit question on Mar-a-Lago, and that is, I guess we'll see an indictment probably after the midterms.
Yeah, I would want to see. I would want the midterms to happen and then see an indictment. But you could you may even want to wait until after January. Okay, and then
On
you know
January 6th, have the indictment.
yeah, that's what I would do. I would say, okay, you guys still want to do that stuff, so why don't you go ahead and do that? because we're going to sit a new Congress, right?
Yeah.
So, so I believe that the Democrats are going to win the House, both the Senate and the House. So there's going to be a strong show, even in the red states.
Yeah.
You know,
I think you might be right. I mean, the polls are pretty close in terms of the House, but let's see. But to get back to Russia,
okay,
this is a serious thing, and it seems that people have like one eye on it.
they got a migration issue now. They got a refugee issue now.
It's funny, but people like back when this whole thing started with Ukraine, Russia going into Ukraine, a lot of people thought, oh, this is going to be a quick thing.
Mhm.
Not that quick. But and now it's almost like I don't hear anyone saying go Ukraine. I don't hear anyone except Tucker Carlson saying, well, maybe we should have some sympathy for Russia. I mean that scares me a little bit. And I think a lot of people are more like, I'll pay attention when I have to pay attention. And I think they better start paying attention.
Yeah. Well, I think there are people who are saying go 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 Ukraine. They're just not saying it publicly, and they're not saying it really loud. But I
Yeah,
think there are a lot of people that are doing that. And what you want to see is whether or not on the right people start. There's always been this for about the last couple months. Every time Biden says we're going to send more money, there's a small group of Republicans that want to try and put a halt to that,
right,
and then you also hear the folks on the so-called conservative media, right,
right.
start to talk that stuff. But nobody's up for it because, generally speaking, especially when the UN investigators start finding mass graves, and they're able to prove that, and they're going and they're doing their DNA testing now and all the rest of that stuff. Now that you got Russian refugees that are heading for countries that have always they've been broadcasting a little bit more of the reality of what's going on in Ukraine than Russia has. Obviously, that it's easy to beat Russia because I don't know, SF State had RT as a featured cable station on our cable access on
Really?
campus.
Russian propaganda.
Yeah, and it was straight up Russian propaganda, but it was mild. It was mild, and it was useful because you could see what their criticism was of Obama, for example.
Yeah.
For that. But I was always wondering, what's the connection with American politics? Because it was clear that RT was not just the purpose of RT was to propagandize the West and to propagandize the U.S. And all you had to do was look at their coverage and the kind of people that they would have. They had a lot of people with British accents, right?
Right, right,
And they had American journalists,
right.
doing their stuff.
They're routinely advertising, trying to recruit American journalists to go work for RT.
Yep,
Come anchor for RT.
right.
Be a propagandist. It's like Fox News of Russia.
Yeah, it was relatively mild, but what you could notice was that their criticism of anything going on in Russia was extremely mild, and sometimes they would feature. Remember the what was the name of that women's rock group?
Pussy
The
Riot.
Pussy Riot. Yeah,
Love
Pussy
Pussy
Riot.
Riot. Nadia Tolanaskova, I think her name.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And so they would get coverage of that kind of stuff, and maybe if some Western rockers, like U2 or whoever went over to Russia and did some stuff,
yeah.
but it was really clear to me that they were setting things up. What was really saddened me was when Al Jazeera TV,
Yeah. When they
uh, yeah, had to cut back. Because they
well,
were,
they're still around. People
yeah,
have
they are. You got to do Al Jazeera Plus, but they had a station operating right downtown San Francisco, right?
sure.
And
No, I know. I look. I was a fan. I used to watch, but This is why it's important to have multiple silos, not just
There
one.
you go.
Go in and out, and but you have to have a diversity of news sources so that you can have an opinion. But anyway, all right. So Russia,
Yeah, can I have an
let's
informed opinion, an
and
accurately informed opinion? Yeah,
so you can report opinion. So
yeah, yeah.
let's put Russia to bed. We're not going to solve it. Um, and
No, but I think they're going to have a migration problem. Also, I want to see what happens when they put those people on the front line.
yeah, oh yeah,
They're going to be putting a lot of people in, right in the face of danger, and I want to see how they behave because I would not be surprised if you see mutinies.
yeah. I
You see people, whole units, killing off their generals and their majors and their colonels,
see.
and perhaps not surrendering, okay, but saying we refuse to fight, and
But
then daring the rest of the military to come and get them. I wouldn't be surprised if you see that.
you're seeing protests now. You're seeing them. You started seeing mothers last week. Starting it off because no one likes to see. It's sort of like the Vietnam War protests here. No one wants to see the body bags come home, and the mothers don't want to see their sons, come home in body bags. So I think that's the hope if that can mobilize. Although, look, these are mothers crying with their hankies, and they're going up against Putin and his henchmen and his army, uh, and only if all the protests are exposed in the West, because that's going to indicate weakness on the part of Putin, and maybe protests can be effective. But you're dealing with an autocrat. He didn't care.
No, he's not only an autocrat. I mean, that's giving him
Too much credit.
appropriate credit, but yeah, I called him a gangster in my class,
Yeah.
and I had people criticize me. Students in the class criticize me, and so I started describing his behavior, and I started describing the people that surrounded him. I said, "You can call it an oligarchy, right?
Right.
You can call it all kinds of fancified names, okay, out of the political vocabulary. But the reality is that he operates as a gangster,
Yeah.
okay, and underlying Russian culture, political culture, even during the Soviet regime,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
were the gangs,
Yeah.
okay.
It is not. I mean, people pull their punches a lot in the media, unfortunately, because they don't want to seem biased. They don't want to. They want to appear fair. But if you're going to call, if you're going to be truthful, I think you're right. You call Putin a gangster. Uh, it's me calling him an autocrat gave him too much credit.
Yeah, it was a nice, sophisticated term,
Yeah.
Even when you call, I think oligarchy is pretty good because of the class status
Yeah.
that a
Corrupt.
lot of the people who are pro Trump, pro Putin have.
Corrupt. Yeah. Corrupt
Yeah,
rich person is better.
exactly,
Corrupt,
exactly. But,
corrupt rich
but
elitists.
they enjoy that level of social and economic position
Yeah.
because of their gangsterism, of their corruption. You know,
Right. And really, um, it's all just might. Might makes right,
that's right.
and Putin has the might right now. He's not right, but he's got the might. All right. So look, let's move on to the big issue that we're at the eve of Filipino American History Month.
So, what do we commemorate? What do we celebrate? What is there that I got a question for you? What is there that should be celebrated by Filipinos about their history in America that
Yeah.
doesn't get enough attention, that doesn't get commemorated or celebrated?
Well, before I think the last 20 years, it's been pretty much, the veterans, right? And now they've gotten some money. They're, you
The
know,
veteranos, yeah.
veterans. But, the thing about the veterans is it has not been really explained well in general so that people don't understand that we're talking basically about Filipinos who answered the call in the Philippines and they were members of the Philippine Scouts. They were Philippine citizens, and they joined the USAFFE, U.S.
Yep.
Armed Forces of the Far East, and you
There
know,
were guerrillas also that were
really,
U.S. youth aid. Yeah.
and the thing is, there are people who were here in America already, like my father, your father. They were here, and they weren't American citizens, but they were here during World War II, at the start of World War II, and they were allowed to fight in World War II. And they're in a separate category, really,
Yeah.
because they joined the regular army. They
That's
got
right.
all the benefits. They weren't screwed like the veteranos in the Philippines. But somehow, and then it's even further mixed up because some of those veterans were able to join the regular army in the U.S. Army in the Philippines, not just the USAFFE. And some of them have subsequently come over to America and gotten some benefits, but not the benefits that they were due as Filipinos who answered the call of FDR in 1939. So there's a lot of confusion about which groups are the cool groups, who are the aggrieved, and because if you were in California and then you joined the Filipino, the
The
first,
first and second regiments. Yeah.
you're basically an American,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and you weren't denied any benefits.
Well, they
And
were even offered citizenship before deployment.
right,
Um,
they became citizens, and totally different animal than the Filipinos who are guerrillas or USA FFE in the Philippines. So the veterans conversation, I think, needs to be cleared up so people don't commingle them.
yeah.
They have been commingled because in that Congressional Gold Medal
Yeah. That's right.
awarding, they included everyone.
That's right.
And so,
That's an attempt to be democratic and also to resolve some of the conflicts that arose when the veteranos first started to mount, or people who were championing the veteranos first started to mount their political and legal campaign.
yeah, I mean, it really is confusing to some. And if people just take the time and get the explanation, they'll see, oh, there are Filipinos over there. They got screwed. The Filipinos over here, they became citizens, joined the regular army, and they went to fight. They didn't get screwed as,
Yes, some became citizens. Not everyone. My father was First Regiment Company A, so he signed up right away as soon as it was available. But a lot of my fictive and blood cousins, their fathers and
well,
uncles did the same thing. So they did not necessarily all accept the offer initially, but many people did.
yeah.
And then they were offered citizenship again. And so were their veteranos. It's
Ah,
just that the veteranos then had their offer reneged
right.
within a year after the end of the Second World War. So by December 46, right,
Yeah.
they had their original offer reneged. Okay.
Oh, that's right, because of the Rescission Act.
That's right, Rescission Act, exactly.
Yeah. But they were offered in 41.
Yes,
Yeah. And then
initially, yes.
so that's a that's not even a fine point of it. I mean, it's a fine point because most people don't know it, but it's just some basic Filipino American history that
I,
people.
I I agree with you that it's a fine point when you look at the distinction, the actual legal distinction, but it's a major point because of the effect of the exclusion.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
because you had hundreds of thousands of people excluded, and the rescission was an abandonment of that group of people.
but
Now,
but
yeah,
Dan, how many people when they heard of the rescission, and they grew up like me, in America, they were born and raised. They saw they didn't make the distinction between the guys over there and the guys over here, and that's that's why I think it's important not just for
Absolutely, I agree.
Filipino Americans, but for subsequent generations of Filipino Americans and just regular folks who want to get some clarity
The
on.
general population of the United States.
Oh yeah, we
You
don't.
know,
They
you
don't
know.
know. I mean,
I think it's like well, it's like the problem with the incarceration of Japanese Americans. I mean, in the years after the Second World War, they didn't want to talk about it.
the
They didn't
Japanese,
want, yeah, Japanese Americans who suffered that
right?
didn't want to talk about it. And I remember growing up with Japanese American kids who asked about it. Second generation people like ourselves
Right.
who asked about it and who were met with silence.
Yeah.
And so it was that generation that also participated in the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement, that eventually started the redress and reparations movement,
Right. Right. So
and
I
and, and succeeded.
yeah,
Right?
and I think that's you know related to that point where the Filipinos were.
That's my point.
Yeah, because when the Japanese Americans were incarcerated, and right after Pearl Harbor, the Filipinos or the next target after Pearl Harbor for the Japanese was Manila, as you know, and when Filipinos here in America saw that got their dander up, and the Filipinos in America here became anti-Japanese,
That's right.
including anti-Japanese American, and that's one of the reasons why they wanted to go to war. That's why the first and second, right, got
Right.
going. Right, they really wanted to fight and to show that because they weren't citizens, but they wanted to show that they were worthy of that, and that they wanted to fight and defend America and also defend their home country.
Yes, I agree with most of what you said. There were some people, including my father, who made the distinction between Japanese American and Japanese
Yes,
imperial. Okay, but there there were people who bragged about going into J Town or looking for people who even looked Japanese and beating them up or even stabbing them.
right,
And the Filipinos would brag about that stuff. My father told me about it, and I asked him, "How did you feel about it?" He goes, "It wasn't fair. There was two different people."
yeah,
And he goes, "The proof of that was that they got sent to the concentration camps."
yeah,
You
and
know,
that's an important thing because, as you know from former colleague Don Mabalan, history professor, San Francisco State, she writes in her book about Stockton. How
right?
there were people in Stockton who were anti-Japanese.
That's right.
There were Filipino Americans in Stockton who had signs that said, "Hey, I'm an American." Right?
Right.
I'm not Japanese. Or how about? And this was true in the Chinese American community. Chinese here had signs that said, "I'm not. I'm not. I'm American,"
Right.
or "I'm not Japanese."
Yeah.
And so there was a real anti-Japanese sentiment in the Asian American community and in the Filipino American community, and it this is another one of those things, these subtle things that happen in the community that doesn't get talked about a lot, mostly because no one wants to talk about it. It's not
Sure.
a very flattering thing.
Well, there was the attempt, the 1920 cooperative strike that was supposed to have happened in Hawaii.
Mm,
There was the plantation workers, both Japanese, Hawaiian, as well as Filipinos, were planning a joint strike. And it didn't work out that way because there was a difference in timing. The Filipinos wanted to strike after they had gotten paid for the current crop and all that. But the Japanese wanted to strike beforehand. And so the Filipinos refused to participate in that. The Japanese did go out on strike. They got kicked off the plantation housing, and then a flu epidemic hit, and hundreds of Japanese Hawaiians died
Mm.
because they were exposed. They didn't have adequate housing. They didn't have medical care. They got the flu. A lot died, and their attitude towards Filipinos
Mm.
was solidified. Their negative attitude towards Filipinos was solidified, and you can see that attitude even now. I mean,
Yeah.
for a long time, Filipinos were seen as second to the bottom, with only Hawaiians, indigenous people, and Samoans, at the very bottom, other Pacific Islanders at the very bottom, and even that persisted, even though we had a Filipino American governor
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
Hawaii. You know,
I lived in Hawaii for a couple of years, and I noticed that
you,
all.
you wrote for the Advertiser, I remember.
I noticed that feeling that it still persists.
Right.
It's still there.
Well,
And
you were there at the time that there was a protest at the Association of Asian American Studies
I think so.
against
Against,
Lois Yamanaka's book, Blues
oh yeah,
Hanging. Remember
Blue-
Blues Hanging?
I remember
Yeah.
blues hanging. Yeah,
Right.
I was there during that time.
Yes,
Yes.
you were. I was reading your stuff. I was there too, so I was reading your stuff. I was at the conference, so
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
It's funny. It's like, well, do people talk about blues hanging still?
Only the people who are of that generation.
Yeah.
Um,
I think.
those generations. There was a young group of people coming up,
Yeah.
many of whom were still working on their PhDs, like Theo Gonzalez, for example.
Right. Right.
And they were already members, and they were among the leadership, the national leadership of the AAAS, and they had a protest against the award being given to literary award being given to Blues Hanging.
Yeah. I forget if it was a national book award or what, but it was a prominent book award. It was just the book was getting some notice, and
Well, it was well written. I mean, it was a really interesting book, and her development of characters, and from a strictly literary point of view, her use, her accurate depiction of pigeon
Mhm.
and the use of pigeon language, was really right, spot on. The problem was that there were no redeeming Filipino characters, right?
well,
There was
here's the thing. I'm all for the artistic expression of the writer, but I'm also for the debate that ensues if people have a problem with it. So I'm glad there was a debate. I'm glad that it just didn't go you know, uncommented on, that it didn't go unnoticed by the community. But I think historically, a minor point, but it does indicate where how Filipino Americans and Filipinos in general were seen in Hawaii.
Yeah, I think that was a legit protest, and the reaction of the senior leadership of the AAAS was quite telling.
Yeah.
Anyway,
All right, so let's talk about. We got time for a couple more things about Filipino American history. We got a whole month. It starts October 1st and goes to the October 30th. We share October 1st through 15th with the Hispanic Heritage
that's right.
Month, and then they go away, and then it's our month. So this is kind of like the colonial half.
Yeah, the colonized,
Yeah. This is
the
the
colonized people,
Yeah.
formerly colonized, right? Yeah.
And then from the 15th on, it's the uncolonized version.
I don't know why you would even think about the commonalities with names like Guillermo and Gonzalez. Why would we even consider this as a factor in our lives?
Look, here's something that I noticed. I noticed that when you check off a box,
Yeah,
there's a
we
new
get to
box.
that other thing,
There's a new box now that says not Hispanic.
Yeah, non-Hispanic.
So I think what they really mean is I'm Filipino. Look, yeah.
Yeah, do you check that one and the other, and then fill in other? Say it.
You check out not Hispanic, and then you check out Asian,
Yeah.
and maybe you put out other because
Yeah.
they want you to be able to describe what
Yeah,
you
man. a lot of the academic writing now, and some journalism follows this. The data accumulation follows it too. And then they now put Filipinos under SEA, Southeast Asian,
Oh wow.
which we always were. I mean,
Oh, we are.
I have always taught it. I have always taught that Philippines, Southeast Asia, and I do that because of the cultural, the geopolitical, and historical relationships.
Just look at
It's really obvious.
yeah, well, look at a map, and all right, here's the problem. Here's the problem. You look at a map, and people might say, "Oh, Philippine Islands,
Yeah,
you're an islander." Yeah,
yeah,
and
yeah.
people on Long Island are Pacific Islanders too. No,
So the Japanese.
yeah, yeah.
How about Malaysia?
Well,
How about Indonesia?
well, yeah, they're all islands. Hey,
Yeah,
all-
we all Pacific Islanders, and they're in the Pacific.
so that's why Pacific Islander. No, that refers to Fiji or I don't know
Well,
what
yeah,
Samoa, the Native Hawaiian,
right.
Tuatagavaloa,
Yeah, and
uh,
one of the ways that they distinguish Pacific Islanders. Remember the old term Oceanic Negrids?
oh yeah.
Oceanic Negrids. Because there are some striking similarities, especially hair type,
Yeah,
right? With Africans,
yeah,
indigenous African people. So, and there's a lot of migration theory and all the rest of that stuff, right?
yeah. But that's the thing. So I've bumped into Filipinos who say, "Oh, I'm a Pacific Islander." Oh, really?
Why don't you ask the Pacific Islanders?
I think you're right though. I mean, I've never just straight out said, "Oh, South SEA, Southeast
Yeah,
Asia,"
we're FCA. There's no
but
question.
I see it, and I've been to. I was in Malaysia.
Yeah, you can.
And,
You just pick up some of the words. A
uh,
lot of the words are common
yeah,
with Tagalog and Ilocano. You can hear words, and then you say, "What's that? What's the meaning of that word?" Even basic stuff like, "What's your word for pig?"
yeah. Well,
You
look,
know?
we're Malayan people.
Yeah, no kidding. Really?
Well, a lot of people don't say Malay. You mean like Malaysia?
Yeah.
Malayan. Well, yeah, it's like everything was once connected, and the earth sort of like
All of those archipelago nations, they
yeah.
were all one thing.
So when I went to Thailand, uh,
Okay.
Thai, they're a little. I think we got some colonialization going on there, but Thailand to Malaysia, Singapore. I mean, we
Yeah.
belong. We belong in that group, along with the Cambodian. Are the Cambodian in that group?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cambodian, Vietnamese. They're in that group,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
all the
Everybody on what used to be called the Indo-Chinese Peninsula, right? All of that. You can look at Burmese,
oh yeah,
you know, Sri Lankan, all that. All of that is part of it, and the relationship. You can also look at it in terms of their historical relationship to the large imperial powers, right? China on the one hand, and India on the other, and we all had relationships with those imperial powers.
great. And thank goodness for the Queen dying because she's reminded. If it weren't for the Queen dying,
Yeah, it was an exercise in history, and people in Africa and all over Asia were saying, "Well, she was a nice person, but let's take a look at British history." Let's take,
it wasn't. Look
yeah,
at
these people were genocidal.
that. So,
you know,
that's the thing about the Queen. God won't
like the
take.
way you put it. Thank goodness the Queen died.
Yeah. Well, that's sort of like the anti-colonial "God Save the Queen."
Yeah, yeah, right.
That's the song they sang was "Thank goodness that the Queen died."
Yeah,
But
yeah,
but no, because she fostered this whole commentary, and they can go to my Aldef blog, aaldef.org/blog, and see what I wrote about the Queen. Because if you didn't know your British history, you didn't know about how the British Empire was formed based on violence, based on extreme bullying and incarceration and genocide. I guess you could make a case for that. The British historian. Well, she's an American historian of British history at Harvard. Um, her book British Gulag talks about the camps in Kenya in
Right.
the 50s and 60s.
It was definitely more genocidal in some instances than others.
Yeah, and but look, that incarceration in Kenya, it did result in reparations.
Right. Right. That's true.
Is an admission that did something wrong, colonization. Anyway, uh, we went off far afield again, but that's what we do.
We were doing Filipino American history, and we got into
Well, because this is the colonial part, the 1st to the 15th of October, and the 15th through the 30th will be
just us.
all our
It's all about how we're different.
yeah. We talked about the veteranos, the
Yes.
veterans issue. It'll talk about some other aspects of the Japanese Americans incarceration. But if there
And
was,
also, well, Filipino and Japanese marriages,
oh yeah, there was a lot.
and how the children, the spouses and children of those marriages were in the camps,
Yeah,
and so Filipinos in the U.S. military, if they got R and came back to the states, they had to go visit their families in the camps.
yeah.
I mean, I've
This,
never seen anybody write about that.
yeah, that's interesting. You know what I've seen? There were Filipino, Japanese, Americans marriages, and they had to flee, right? And um, uh, the newspaper archives of your colleague at Alex Fabros talks about Filipino Japanese couples going to Iowa,
Right.
saying, "Don't you're not welcome in Iowa." I
Right.
and I know that because my car broke down in Iowa. I was stuck for 5 days. I did not feel welcome in Iowa. And then
Yeah, you didn't hit it when there was a state fair, because
uh,
then you could
yeah,
have gotten the battered deep fried butter.
yeah, I know. I missed the state fair by a week.
Oh,
I had to get to Washington D.C., so we ended up driving away. But I know they said, "Oh, you're not staying for the fair." Oh no, so no heart attack this year for me. No, but I also from Alex Fabros's newspaper archive, Filipino Japanese American relationships
yep.
couple. They go to Florida, and they're more accepted. So um, I hope they weren't.
I wish I had the motivation and the foresight back then, but I do know a family, and I did hang with the children, the second generation kids of Japanese Filipino marriage, where where the wife was Japanese
Yeah,
descent. The Pangan family, they were
Pangan.
the kids were half Japanese, half Filipino.
Yeah, the halves. You can just tell them. You can see them, and you know that they got something. The Asian. The
Right.
Asian in them. Like there's a lot of a lot. Um, the catcher for the Atlanta. I think he catches for the Atlanta Braves. Travis Darno used to play for the Mets. Half Filipino.
Oh,
The
I
Dar-
didn't know that.
yeah, the Darno family. Brother played for the Giants for a little bit. I think he's still in baseball. But Travis was an All-Star this year. Uh,
Far
you know,
out.
you could just go through all the different lineups and you can pick out a handful of half Asian or full Asian. Um, Stephen Kwan, uh, Cleveland Guardians outfield. He's full, I believe. He played for Oregon State. He's now leadoff. Could be rookie of the year. Cleveland Guardians. They changed their name from Indians to Guardians because Indian made him
Yep.
sound South Asian.
Right.
So, but there's a lot, and then of course in football, Tua Tagovailoa, Marcus Mariota, Unhi, I think Sue or Koo, Atlanta Falcons kicker. $25 million contract he signed this year.
No kidding. 25 mil. I didn't know that.
5 year, 25 million. Yeah. Yun Ku, I think his name. Yun Soo Ku.
Yeah,
25 million.
that's pretty cool.
Asian Americans are all over. But Filipinos, Harvard had a punter. I think he's graduating this year. He might be good enough to play pro. Maybe Harvard punter. Play for the NFL. Anyway,
Well,
so
the Niners got one guy from Harvard. I can't remember which guy it is, but yeah.
Jusek, the
Is
fullback.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kyle Jusek, the fullback. So look, as we wind down, I think still I was going to talk about the veteranos, but the other issue that has really hit, has captured everyone's imagination the last 10 years, Larry Itliong.
Okay.
I think, but is time faded, or I think Larry Itliong is perennial. I think Larry.
Yeah, I think he is too. Alex Fabros is critical of Itliong from the perspective of his his less than successful organizing of Filipinos.
He did
Yeah.
organize, but he was not. I mean, are you saying he wasn't Chavez?
Well,
Or
yeah.
not
Even without regard to Chavez, I don't think. I think that there's some merit to Alex's argument that he wasn't that effective.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
look, for
you
for
know,
pe- for people who don't know, Larry Itliong was the Filipino American union leader. Uh, Came to America in the 20s, worked did union activity from maybe the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Actually, started the Delano grape strike.
right.
The Filipinos started it. It was AFL-CIO.
It
Uh,
was AWOC originally,
the
the Agricultural Workers of California, which was a overwhelmingly Filipino leadership, although it was open union and it had members of several different ethnicities, including some Mexicans.
Yeah, and the problem with AWOC is that they didn't have all the farms.
That's right.
They didn't have the workers, all the workers, and there was a great migration of Spanish worker or Mexican workers rather, and that's when they needed Cesar Chavez. Chavez wasn't a union though. Chavez was just a loose knit organization, but it was Chavez and Dolores Huerta after the great Delano grape strike was started by the Filipinos on September 5th. Within 2 weeks, Chavez and Huerta brought their Mexican workers to the strike, and that's what formed the United Farm Workers. So
Right.
that's the history.
That's the history.
And,
That's the history. The
and
guy who gets less mention is Veracruz.
yes,
Phil-
and
you know,
Philip Veracruz. And tell me why that's so, because I know that Philip Veracruz was more like Chavez's right hand. He was not.
he stayed with the Union. Larry left
Yeah.
angry
Yeah.
in 70, or I think it was 71. I remember seeing him at the I Hotel.
Yeah.
And I also he spoke at one of the first West Coast Filipino youth conferences, which was held at Bessie Carmichael School, and
Right.
I took pictures of him there. In fact, a couple of my photographs have been used in other books, but he was very angry at the union because Huerta was credited with coming up with a policy that favored Mexican seniority. They counted Mexican membership in NFWA, which you mentioned earlier was kind of a loose, pretending to be a union. Yeah,
Wasn't a union.
yeah,
And
it was an association, but not a union.
that was one of the Larry. Never met him. Know his son. Um, but that was one of It Leong's where people would they would criticize him for being
Yeah.
too hot-headed, too willing to fight, too but some people would say that was his virtue.
Yeah.
That was Larry It Leong's virtue. Uh, if people are interested, I wrote some things on Larry It Leong on NBC and also on the Aldif blog. So just Google my name and Larry It Leong, and you'll see a number of articles on the grape strike and also on this tape. We should talk about this some other time
Okay.
in a month because
Yeah,
here's
but distinguishing Larry from Mr. Itliong from Mr. Veracruz, I knew Philip much better personally.
nice. He's a nicer. He seemed to be a gentler guy.
Yeah, far more philosophical and far more willing to work diplomatically with people of differing opinions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
See, I
really.
I think I would have liked Veracruz more personally and intellectually, although It Leong was more like the Ilocano, you know, fighting Ilocano like my
He
dad.
was willing to fix you, huh?
Yeah,
You
I would.
keep that up. I'm going to fix you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things I liked about him, but but I know that
He was definitely gruff. I mean,
he rubbed people the wrong way. But
yeah, he
have
was
you
a
ever
gruff
heard?
dude.
Did you hear him talk?
Oh
Did you?
yeah,
Yeah, his tapes. He was a tough guy.
yeah,
Tough guy, Larry.
yep, and yeah,
Sell out my people.
he actually got similar reaction from white people, including some of the Jesuit priests that taught me. He got and the Jesuits were going through this whole ecumenical process, right, in the '60s, in the late '50s, early '60s, but some of them were still quite conservative,
Yeah,
and they railed against the strike, the
yeah,
the great boycott.
yeah. I
Uh,
think I think that what happened was he did the right thing, but because he was an fu kind of Filipino,
yeah,
and I I
was that Fordham University? Is that what
yeah
that
yeah,
FU? Okay.
and I'm all for fu.
I
I
think
mean
you need them both. You need them both.
I think
You need somebody that can turn on the FU, and you need people that can say, well, come on, the good cop, bad cop kind of situation. You need them both, and I tended to be more of the Veracruz type when I had to do political things,
yeah
I'll be frankly, I really succeeded a lot
yeah.
by using those methods, but.
Well, you're
But you
right.
always you ran, you were asking why Philip doesn't get as much notice, and it was because he wasn't as hot
Yeah,
as Larry. Philip stayed with the Union, as far as I can remember, at least until '77, if not '78, before he
yeah,
retired.
yeah. But I think it was also not because he wasn't as hot, but I think in his rhetoric and his actions. But I think he doesn't have the kind of advocacy for him. Although there are books written about him. People see him as
Yeah,
you know, you know, because Larry, like you said, Larry left. He was not second to Chavez. He wanted to point out I was there first, and then I left, and then they tried. Larry's thing was they tried to bribe me. They tried to bribe me. They wanted me to help Chavez. You know, and he was not going to bow down to the white man. That's the aspect of Larry Leon, the FU part that
hmm
I like that because
well, people don't know that part either. They don't know when you say I'm not going to bow to the white man. What does that got to do with Chavez?
well it no
And the answer is
it has something to do with the unions and the
yeah,
unions controlling
and the Democratic Party.
and the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party wanted It Leon to support wanted him to support Humphrey,
Yeah, that's right.
and he was a Bobby Kennedy guy. But I think Chavez was a Bobby Kennedy guy too.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah.
I'm just guessing. But that was one of the things about Chavez. Chavez was a kind of meditating Martin Luther King, Gandhi type of guy, and It Leon was let's fight,
Yeah.
let's get ready to rumble, and uh, you know Chavez was a let's get ready to meditate, and I think that's important. I mean I think that, like you said, you got to have both. I become much more of a meditator um, in my older days.
You keep
Latter,
making the age reference.
yeah, my latter year. Well, I think you see
I think you've been reasonably, model of wisdom for at least a decade, maybe more. I thought you were quite wise.
at least a decade, but yeah,
Yeah,
for
you,
sure.
you, you, yeah, you showed true wisdom rather than just being a wise guy.
Yeah,
You
but had I been more forceful, well, less forceful, more strategic,
Yes,
or
there you go.
had I been more strategic, and I think that was Larry's problem. Larry wasn't as strategic. He was maybe tactical, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to fight you.
I'm
You
going to fix you. Yeah,
Also,
yeah,
he was gambling pool. Yeah,
yeah,
but he was effective. He was effective in his own way, but it had to be his way, right? He was a my way or the highway kind of guy, right?
yeah, yeah.
And I think that's and look,
Tough and gruff.
yeah,
7-fingered Larry.
Evan,
Yeah.
do you know what seven? Do you know what seven is?
Yeah.
They told me once. I forget which ones, but
Yeah, me too. I
he
can't. Yeah.
lost his fingers a- as a
Alaska, sa Alaska.
yeah. He was
Okay,
a
banana.
Alascaro.
Yeah,
Alascaro. He
he's part
but
of that major part of that history.
and this is the thing about Larry, and we were going to talk about Carlos Vila because he was a
Well, yeah, I haven't seen the exhibit yet. It's still up, at least the one inside the Asian
yeah.
museum.
It's still look. All right, we'll talk about it in a second.
I'm planning on going this coming week, so
Are you
we can
really
talk
okay?
about it next week. Yeah.
Let's talk about that offline,
Okay.
and because I may if I'm free, maybe I'll come join you with my mask
Okay.
because I'm still a masked man.
Yeah, me too. We
Oh,
are. We are
he-
as well.
here's the thing that I noticed: the Warriors were playing basketball this morning. How do I know? Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and it's like 3 o'clock, and I'm looking at my phone, and the Warriors are playing. They're playing it where in Japan. It says live. They're playing in Japan.
Yeah.
Great. It was great. And the Warriors won. They beat the Washington Wizards. James Wiseman is going to be a monster. He's going to be. He's
Yeah. Yeah.
the Warriors are going to have not that Kevon Looney wasn't a great center, but he was a defensive center. James Wiseman is going to be a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar type offensive guy.
Hmm.
He's great. He's great. I mean, you see signs of greatness. And everyone else, they're going to have so much talent on the Warriors. The young guys are good. The young draftees, they're going to make the guys that they drafted the year before look, like they're going to need playing time. Moses Moody, Jonathan Kaminga. I worry that they got new bucks coming up, kind of like pushing them. So that'd be good. Everyone's getting pushed up. But anyway, the Warriors were great, and they're playing in Japan. So guess what? They put the camera in the stands, and everyone's wearing a
A
mask.
mask.
That is an Asian thing. The
It
mask,
is. It
the mask.
is. Even before we knew what COVID was happening, I was still teaching in person classes. 2019, and I asked my class. I said, "Hey, has anybody noticed that people are wearing masks in the Richmond district? Like on Clement and Geary, but especially on Clement." And
Yeah.
and people looked at each other and said, "No, we didn't notice." But I noticed it right away. And so these were people who probably go back and forth
Yeah. Well,
fairly,
or
fairly, you know.
well, back and forth. They may be transnational somewhat, but
That's right. Yeah.
I bet you it's just this.
It's a cultural. It became a cultural thing because of the so many events.
Yeah,
You
and
know, in China and in Asia generally, right? You know.
SARS and
Yep.
bird flu
Yep.
and
Yep.
look, I'm all
The
for it.
avian flu.
If that's our thing, I'm adopting it. If that's our thing, all right,
Well, it matches the ice. It matches the ice.
not just the ice. It's the mask. I'm a mask. I'm a
Yeah,
mask.
we definitely do the mask thing. I got every car has a couple of sets of brand new masks in them.
Oh yeah,
You
and
know,
I
my
I discovered a whole box, a whole box,
okay,
dozens. So
they
I
have to be N95 or better. They have to be N95 or 94 like that.
get in,
KNs too. I got the KNs.
get in.
Those
I get
those are kind of I like the KNs are nicer because they fit better around the chin.
yeah. I like the KN. The KN
Yeah,
is
me
good.
too. I
So look,
do.
KN, wear your mask. I saw those masks and I felt at home. Because you watch a game in America, like the baseball games, the football games. Like you
Nah,
might
people are
one,
pretty loose.
one person mask. Oh,
Yeah,
we're outdoors. But look, a basketball game, you're indoors and they're all masked. They were all masked. But you watch indoor games here, like you know any kind of American sporting event indoors, even people see masks. So
yeah, and you see the COVID rate go up. You see
yeah,
the infection rate. I know of people who have now had two hits
yeah.
of COVID. They've contracted it twice, but they had minor symptoms each time.
Yeah, yeah,
But what my wife is concerned about. Okay, so you got minor symptoms. How about long term? How
yeah.
about long COVID? What is that going to be hanging with you for a while? We don't
You,
even know how to test for it.
you
You
got to
know,
worry.
yeah,
You
because
got to
it
worry.
won't show up on a basic home COVID test. You know,
Yeah. So, yeah. All right. So I'm masked. I'm going out very carefully. But
sure. I'm gonna take you out to dinner, but you got to tell me where there's a place that does no meat, but at the same time is outdoors. That they have an outdoor.
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
What do we call those things now? Parklets. We
Are
call
they
them parklets.
called parklets? Oh my God. They call them parklets. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's one of the names. You know,
Well, look. Let's
outdoor seating.
we'll talk offline. But we'll and
What?
if
We're not going to talk about the Carlos Villa exhibit online? Why not?
no, we'll talk about the Carlos Villa exhibit online. But
Like next week? But
yeah, like next week because
what?
I
What?
I am
We're going to
still
talk. We're going to talk dirty offline.
yeah yeah oh yeah yeah I have I I bought the poster right
Okay.
the tattooed face and I didn't realize well I guess I should have known that Bontalk and the tattoos it's a thing and but I I'm haunted by the face
Right
and
on.
and I just see his face. There's this um, one big mural type of, I guess, uh, work that's called First Impressions. It's just his face. It's self portrait, and it's just haunting. I just it's his face replicated about 50 times, and it's a haunting work of art. I like that more than his capes and shoes and some other things, but it really it stayed with me. And very rarely do you go to an exhibit and like one, two, do you remember?
He had some hanging sculptures. And he had one in particular that he had in his studio forever, and
Yeah,
it was a forearm and hand, and it
uh,
was it was a metal construction, welding rod. And I always looked at that, and I always said, "Boy, I wish I never expressed to him. I expressed to him that I really loved that piece, but he met Kubert. He met Kubert.
Oh, and Kubert got the forearm, huh?
Yes, but it made sense, right? Because Kubert's a spinner. I mean, yes, exactly.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it went to an appropriate person, but man, I mean, he's given me stuff. Carlos gave me stuff, and one of them is hanging in my office. It's been in there for a better part of a decade.
yeah,
But it was he was on his way to doing his big exhibit of hanging uh, brass placards, hanging on chains. That was at one of the San Mateo exhibit spaces, and he gave me a what he called a painting that had those brass placards affixed
yeah,
geometrically on this really large piece of work. The thing is about 30 inches high and at least 4 feet wide,
yeah.
and it's in
Wow.
yeah, it's in my office.
Well, all right, let's talk about that because I think talking about Filipino artists, Filipino American. I mean, this is the thing
There you
about
go.
Philippine. He was born here,
Yeah,
1936, and he is that missing generation from the Manongs. The Manongs were his parents, but they were my parents too. I was just
yeah,
born later,
yeah,
you know. We were just born later, and it feels like I'm. I know, yeah, we'll talk about all that generational stuff, but this is Filipino American history.
yeah.
This is, and
He,
it's
his stuff got criticized too. Some of the
oh
things that he did that were that were intended to memorialize the Manongs.
yeah,
I understood the connections that he was making between the objects that he was changing, and the way he was exhibiting them, and but a lot of people didn't get it, and they thought they really minimized, right, its cultural import,
yeah.
and you know why? Because they didn't understand the Manong generation.
Well, or it was just pure racism, right?
Well, maybe,
I
but
mean,
I'm talking about Filipinos being
oh,
critical of
Filipino,
Carlos
oh,
Jr.
well,
But
that's self hatred. That's self hatred.
yeah, nah, I think some of it, a lot of it's just plain ignorance. They
Well,
really,
what
he did a whole thing on Hamburgs, with
yeah,
hats.
but you're talking about second generation Filipinos, right?
Second and third, and even first generation
Oh yeah.
Filipinos,
Well, come on.
post
People
65ers.
Yeah, they don't know because you know what? They're not Filipino American. They're naturalized Filipino Americans who are more Filipino than American.
And they're actually celebrating Filipino ness with much greater vigor
Then they're
here than
Americanists.
they ever did. Yes.
Yes,
And,
right,
and, and they didn't celebrate being Filipino that much as being in, just traditional stuff in the Philippines.
right. So when they see someone like Carlos Vila, they see him and they say, "What the hell? What the?" And they're totally, like you said, totally ignorant of the Filipino American experience from the 20s, the Filipino American experience from the 30s. Instead, what these people say is, "Oh, what about King Philip? And what about oh, I like the Spanish. I like the it's totally colonial, right? That's a
Uh,
problem.
yeah, a lot of it's very colonial.
Very, very colonial. And they are more Filipino than American. But what did they say? How do they look toward, or what is their perspective on real Filipino Americans? They look down on us.
Yeah, they do.
They look down on the Filipino American because, hey,
We're not
what do you
authentic
think? They
Filipinos.
go back to the Philippines. They just made me into Tucker Carlson. They just made me into Tucker Filipino. They just turned me into a conservative. Back home. I am home.
Bakit? Bakit hindi marunong Tagalog?
Yeah.
Bakit pa?
Oh yeah. Go back to Daly City. No, that's not your home. On the boat and go home. See, that see in
Yeah,
my
they outnumber us, dude. That's the problem. You
in my
see, the problem is ever since like 1973,
yeah,
the first generation, because there's continuous immigration, right? the first generation has always been more than 60%
Yeah.
of our
Well,
total population.
this is the problem with the
They
Filipino.
get to define what it means to be Filipino.
Now they get to define for themselves, but that is a very important
Yeah,
thing.
but they enforce that. They enforce that definition on us.
No, they don't. They don't enforce it on me. They can enforce it for themselves, and whoever is listening in the church of their choice, and to all their kids. But you know, this is
They try to enforce it on us. I mean, I just did the why don't you speak Tagalog, or why don't you speak Filipino? Why don't
I get that all the time. Well, I'm not American. Well, so look, this is the source.
don't you respect your culture?
Ah,
You have dismissed the value of your culture. You don't know anything. You're not really Filipino.
yeah. All right. Thank goodness. Thank goodness I'm not a Filipino. I'm an American Filipino, and
Okay,
that's the point. And a Filipino
you
American.
sound like a Frederick Cordova type.
No.
Like the
Oh, Frederick Cordova
the Fred, Manong Fred.
from Stockton.
Yeah, his nickname in Ilocano would be Pidik. Pidik.
He's not a real
Wait,
Filipino.
Pidik.
No, I love Fred, and
It's
I
hard not to love him, even
and
though he could be hard. He could be tough.
the thing about Fred, we miss him.
Oh yeah,
We miss him. I mean,
he,
because he died before anyone else could gain the same kind of cred that he does that he has.
well, but the reason for his cred is Dorothy.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true.
He was the speaker and the writer, but she was the institutionalist. She
Hey,
built
look,
the institution.
I believe that, and that was a sad thing about FONS, the Filipino American National Historical Society, this last go around.
Up in Seattle, up
I mean, she says it's going to be her last
conference.
conference, but it's sad because I don't know. I think that FONS funds should be a lot further along. I think it would have been if Fred and
If
Dorothy,
Pidik had lived, yeah, a little longer.
because
You
it's
got
sort of,
some really strong second generation folks, and they're capable.
yeah.
Uh,
I think
and the local chapters are pretty good. San Francisco's is rebuilding and it's getting better.
yeah.
But I've always thought that the East Bay chapter,
He's good.
chapters, Vallejo, Oakland, Alameda, I thought they were very strong. Stockton's, was strong, but it's a little more conservative, right? Their
Yeah.
perspective on the history and stuff.
Stockton is real conservative,
Yeah.
and um, so I just remain an at-large member, um, but I think Norfolk, Virginia Beach, that's a strong chapter.
Virginia Beach is pretty strong. Yeah.
Yeah,
But it's also conservative.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. They're conservative.
yeah.
Uh, uh, New York has a strong chapter, a stronger, growing chapter.
Yeah.
But this is the thing about the Filipinos. You got one group, and you say, okay, this is the group. And then another group says, oh, no, 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 this is the group.
Right.
And then another group says, no, no, this is the group. And
And
this
that's
is
what makes Seattle really important because I think they have a good balance between the more conservative types, and the more progressive.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
think they're all pretty well. I think you're right, but I think the progressive types are among a certain generation, and they're getting older. And I don't know where the younger generation is. And
There's a tweener. There's a tweener generation that's a little bit younger than you that are
uh,
now poised. They've been in the national leadership for 20 years,
yeah,
but they're now going to be the senior leadership, and they're good. They're very capable.
yeah,
Uh,
that's
but
true. I
but
mean,
we got
it's
to build a sense of unity, and I think they ought to grow the kind of courage that it takes to be confrontational about the conflicts within our community, the political issues as well as the cultural issues.
See,
You
and
know,
I think that's where Filipino American history, um, that's where it should be more public, but a lot of people want to keep things inside. But I think it should be exposed because some of those conflicts are about attitudes about
yeah,
being
yeah.
Filipino in America.
Well,
And
I think Camaro. Peter still does he still pronounce his name Jamero, or does he do Hamero?
no, he says Jamero.
Yeah, I thought he always did say Jamero,
Yeah,
but he's I think he does that well for his generation. He really digs deep.
Yeah, but Peter's 90.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but
I,
he's a healthy son of a gun, 90
oh, yeah,
boy.
look, I only say that not to denigrate um,
No, no, not
older Filipinos,
obviously not. But
but only to say that uh, that you know we need the entire spectrum, not
yeah,
just
we do.
we need leadership from from the entire spectrum of the Filipino American community, and too much of the community is this, um, this latter day more Filipino than American, or
And,
not quite
we
American.
should talk about this next week too, along with the Carlos stuff,
Sure, sure.
because there are things that I you just reminded me. There are things like the Filipino participation in radical, so-called radical political movements.
Mm,
We don't do that. I don't think we do that. They say, okay, SF State was the beginning of ethnic studies and Filipino American studies. Okay, fine, Asian American studies, but that's all they say.
yeah,
They don't. We don't get into the depth of what that means politically and culturally.
yeah,
And there's only been one book, I think, that incorporates the Filipino experience, and that's Juanita Tamayo Lot's book.
yeah. It's,
Which I think is questionable. The Golden Children book.
I've seen it, but I don't know it. Didn't read it, so can't criticize
It's a
it.
quick
But
read. You should read it just so we can talk about it sometime,
I will say
even offline.
I will say this that the activists were generally lawyers. Is that fair to say?
A lot of them became lawyers.
They became lawyers, and a lot of them were, uh, moderates. I mean, as opposed to truly radical.
Yeah,
And
most of the people who were truly radical or progressive became the institution. They developed their own institutions. So, for example, FAJ, which was established as FAA, those were true radicals. There were a lot of people from KDP, right, that started that
right,
organization.
right, and
Uh,
most of them were Filipino
right.
as opposed to
Yeah. Even in San Francisco, the development of UFYO, the United Filipino Youth Organization, and
right.
groups like that. Marge Talogan and Joe Talogan
Yeah,
were very prominent in that leadership, and they were very progressive and exceptional because they're part of the Jamero generation, right?
yeah,
Now Marge has passed, right? She passed several years ago, but Joe's still around, and
yeah,
he's 90.
yeah. Well, here's the thing: it helps if you have people behind you.
Yeah,
It helps.
there it is.
You can't be a leader if you have no one to lead.
Yes, right.
I mean, so if
That's
you are,
right.
if you're a unionist, if you are, and you have your own organization, even if you're a teacher, you got students. I
Yeah,
mean, that always has been helpful. Martin Luther King had a church. Itliong had until the merger UFW. He had AWOC, and sometimes the outspoken Filipino is an organization of one
too
because
often. Too often. There were a lot of splits. That's a
yeah,
whole nother issue.
yeah,
Filipinos split all the time.
yeah, oh yeah, well,
Remember the 80s and 90s? They were suing each other for
oh yeah,
uh, elections, right, in their own internal organizations, and
Oh yeah, yeah, and then also, who's going to run the community center, or which community center? Uh,
yep,
I'll tell you another guy I miss from Filipino American history, because he tried to do this nationwide. He was a media guy,
you're going to talk Alex,
Alex Escamado.
right?
Got to mention him because he brought together the different communities, and he would barnstorm raising money for his newspaper, which essentially was an anti-Marcos publication, and he rode the the anti-Marcos wave here in America, and was I it
It saved his newspaper from death.
oh yeah,
It wasn't doing that well even before Marcos declared martial law.
right,
But after Marcos declared martial law and started slamming down all of the Filipino media,
yeah.
and people don't understand Philippine media is really something. Before martial law, there were outstanding publications.
Oh sure. Well,
In
everyone had a paper. There were a lot of papers, and but martial law really
it
uh,
decimated the press. It decimated radio and television media. People left the Philippines. They were writing from Shanghai and Singapore and Hong Kong. Mostly Hong Kong and Singapore. But
yeah. Well, it really, and it split up the community here. Between if you were either pro Marcos or
yeah,
anti.
yeah.
And
And here it was clearly most people were pro Marcos.
oh yeah, yeah. Even
The
though
minority was anti Marcos.
even though Alex Escalmado had his anti-Marcos paper, and I'm sure it was fueled mostly by anti-Marcos money. That
As in Lopez.
yeah, the people in exile here.
Oh yeah, there we go. The expats.
Yeah. So that's
There's a whole other thing, man. This is another thing that we could talk about that's part of Filipino American history.
Look, Filipino American history is this varied history that people don't know about.
Yeah,
It's about time.
because they did not take my class.
They, it's not just your class. They did not take notes. They did not
Yeah,
take.
there's a lot of other people that could teach it well, but Peter Bacho, really good. Alex, of course, Alex Fabros. But there's a small group of us that had a take that was, for example, critical of those who anointed Carlos Bulosan,
Oh yeah,
as the truth teller of that Manong experience, right? And
yeah.
there were
Well,
some of us that were critical of that perspective, right?
yeah. Well, it's an important perspective, but
It was a literary perspective. It was not historiographic like most people think. They say, but look, the background is accurate. That happened. I said, oh, he was reading the newspaper while he was sick in a sanitarium somewhere because he always either was killing his liver because he was an alcoholic,
yeah,
or he had problems with tuberculosis.
yeah. Or look, here's the other thing though, because of the suspected communist
Oh
party.
yeah, yeah.
He was. I did a thing on Marilyn Alcazola's book and her husband. They Elaine Hirabayashi. They wrote about the FBI file
Right.
on Bulasan. I mean, it's interesting from the standpoint that here is a Filipino American artist who was hounded by the FBI, and most people don't know it. They FOIA'd the file, and they got the file, and I think you make a case that alcohol and other things were more detrimental to Bulasan's life than the FBI, but the FBI probably didn't help.
No. What made Bulosan successful was that he was upheld by the socialist left
Right.
in the United States as a hero of color, which he in fact was.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is that the whole friggin' leadership of the ILWU Local 37 were socialists. The top leadership were, the Mensalves brothers, and those guys. I think one of the few kind of moderate conservatives was probably Gonzalez.
Yeah.
But anyway, and he's not
Well,
related. I don't.
let
I
me,
don't think he's related. But that's Pete's dad, Pete Gonzalez's dad.
I remember, it's interesting that this all comes out of just having a little discussion about Filipino American history. And
Yep.
it's
Yep.
rich history that no one knows about. And
Very.
that's why there's an entire month and it's history. It's not Heritage Month. So, you can leave the food and the dancing and because it's history.
The cultural side. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's more about trying to understand where we are by where we've been or where we've been hiding. And because here I'm still hiding, right? It's the pandemic. I'm still in my closet. Still hiding.
You were in the closet forever, though.
Yeah. Well, no. Only for the just for the pandemic. But Dan. All right. So we got a lot to talk about. We've talked for a long time already. So let's
We did.
end this now, and we'll talk offline. But so nice to see you, Dan. And on the eve of Filipino American History Month, and happy birthday. Whenever the Johnny Carson show during breaks, they used to have signs up and they'd always say like happy, and then they'd have the astrological sign. So it'd say happy Libra. And it was always Johnny Carson who would be the first to say happy birthday just by putting on the little placard and the bumper when they go to commercial. You hear Doc Severinsen playing his trumpet.
Oh man, that was a great band.
That was a great band. Great band.
Full size orchestra, man, and some of the guests that they had on were just fantastic. They would come alive. I mean, there was. I don't. Did they? Does Time Life have those saved? Some of those Carson shows.
Oh yeah. You can get Tommy Newsom, and remember Buddy Rich was the band.
Sure.
No, they had some really great.
Well, they had a. There was a show. One of the great shows that was, believe it or not, who did Downtown? No, she.
Philip Clark.
Yeah, no, there was somebody else who did uh, Love Music. Dusty Springfield.
Oh, Dusty
She did Love Music, and they did it full orchestration, and it was fantastic, man. And also, there was Aretha. Aretha I think it was it might have been the woman song, but she scatted. She improvised,
Yeah.
and they went along with that, and it was fantastic. The crowd didn't stop clapping for for like 2 or 3 minutes. Carson left his chair, walked all over to the stage, and was staring at her, saying, "I have never seen that happen before. It was that great." I'll tell you that show is freaking underrated. It was perfect for teenagers because at the time, because we couldn't sleep until 1 o'clock anyway. That's the adolescent problem, right? Where you couldn't get to sleep.
Yeah.
So I used to watch that show, religiously, man.
Wow. Okay. I'll tell the nuns. I'll tell
Yeah.
Brother Henry. Hey, listen, Dan. All right. So look, happy Filipino American History Month. We got a lot to talk about starting in October. Happy Libra, and we'll talk again soon. But thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, and once again, it was completely enjoyable.
Well,
even especially where we disagree.
not too often. Not too often.
No,
All right.
no, but it adds a little bit of spice to the dressing.
Oh, of course. And
All right, man.
There he goes. Dan Gonzalez, Professor Dan Gonzalez, Professor Emeritus San Francisco State University, College of Ethnic Studies, Asian American Studies, Filipino American History. My friend, Professor Emeritus. Always a good time on Friday. And so on subsequent Fridays, you should check it out. And Dan will come on and we'll talk more about all these Filipino American history things. That, you didn't think Filipino American history was this interesting, did you? It is. It's fascinating. Fascinating. Hey, before I leave, let me tell you that I am in a play called The Conductor. Yeah, Ishmael reads The Conductor. And I want to correct myself about The Conductor. It is about the woke in San Francisco. But there's this other layer of The Conductor about politics in India having an impact, and people who are Indian in America have to seek refuge if they aren't with the program based on the new prime minister in India. Does it sound real? Is it? This is fiction. It's not fiction. It's based on the news, based on woke attitudes in San Francisco. You're just going to have to see it for yourself. It's called The Conductor. What's he conducting? A railroad train? No, it's like an underground railroad where the people are seeking refuge and they're escaping, looking for freedom. Have I tantalized you? Are you interested? Check it out. The Conductor, October 13th through 16th. It's theater for the new city.org. I'm going to put up here it is. theaterforthenewcity.org. It's up on the screen. Check it out. theaterforthenewcity.net/shows-the conductor. Go to the website, check it out, or call them. You can buy tickets. October 13th through 16th. Tickets are like $18. Call them at the theater. Let's see if a number I can give you. You can call, I don't have a number for the theater, but check them out. Theater for the New City. Oh, here it is. 212-254-1109. 212-254-1109. I have a smallish part. No, not that smallish part, but it's a part. I have a speaking part in The Conductor. I play a news analyst. What a role. So check it. It's a virtual reading. It's in New York, but you can be anywhere and see it on Zoom. It's a virtual reading. But check it out now. Ishmael reads The Conductor at theaterforthenewcity.net. So, we had a listener. Julian Simeon says, another great show, educational, entertaining. Thanks. Oh, thank you, Julian. Julian's a good guy. And we're going to have him back. Julian does some storytelling. We're going to do some storytelling. We haven't because of some of these other things I'm doing, but we're going to do some storytelling. Hey, regular listeners to our show know you can check out the replay of this live stream at amok.com. Check it out also on Facebook, fb.com, facebook.com/emilguillermo.media. Also on YouTube. We're on YouTube. Yeah, follow the algorithm. Subscribe, like us. Do all those things the algorithm says. Also check it out on Twitter. If you're on Twitter, at Emil Amok, EMIL-AMOK. EMIL-AMOK. So that's it. That's it for our show. This is show 399, and it'll be blasted out on the weekend. Check it out. I'll be back again on Monday. Regular listeners to our show know that we like to meditate. We like to meditate. I'm telling you, this is true. You get angry. You want to fight back. But you create the thing that you hate. I mean, you might hate something outside. You might want to lash back, but the thing you're lashing back at sometimes is of your creation. Here's a thought. If you have a tendency to get angry, think about this. Instead of that person's face, see the face of love. Well, what does love look like, Emil? Well, someone you love, someone you revere, someone historical, someone religious. Insert that face, the face of love. When you see someone you think you hate, insert the face of love. It will be almost impossible to be angry. I'm not saying it's something I learned from experience, but if you see the face of love, it'll slow you down on your road to anger. And it may save you from being angry. And so, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Catch us again live Monday. Till then, mahal